Hey, Alana Terry here. Today I am going to be talking about the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. You might know her as the author of the memoir Eat, Pray, Love. And Big Magic is a book she wrote after that memoir, which is all about just the creative process. It's not specific to writers, but she's talking about anybody who is endeavoring to lead and live a more creative lifestyle. So I just pulled out a couple nuggets that I loved from the book and wanted to share them with you, and how these principles can relate to us as authors who are, by the very nature of what we do, very creative. So one of the first things that she talks about in Big Magic is this idea that fear is always going to be with us, but if we allow fear to have control of our creative decisions, then our well of creativity is just going to dry up. And so sometimes we talk about things like, what would life be like if you were totally fearless? And that's even a question that I have posed to other authors. And I ask myself sometimes during some of my journaling reflection time, it's, what would you write if you were convinced that you could not fail? And I feel like that type of questioning really helps us to break out of some of these even subconscious fears that we don't know we're holding on to. I think it's a great way to look at it. In Big Magic, there's a slightly different outlook on it, which is, let's not worry about getting rid of fear. Let's just acknowledge fear is always going to be along for the ride, but let's not give fear the ability to make any decisions. And so what Elizabeth Gilbert did is she wrote fear a letter and says something to the effect of, like, we're going on a trip, creativity and me. I know you're going to come along, but you got to stay in the back seat. You don't get to navigate. You don't get to call the shots. You don't get to touch the radio controls. But hey, come on along, because she recognizes that fear does serve a purpose. If we didn't have fear, right, we would jump on when someone leaves us that 1-star review and we would go and bash them. But fear of being seen as a terrible or a mean person keeps us from doing that. So yeah, sometimes we do need fear for sure. But when it comes to pursuing a lifestyle of deeper and deeper creativity, I do think that it's wise to cultivate a sense of courage. And you can look at it one of two ways. You can look at it more like I look at it. What would you do if fear wasn't an issue at all? What would you do if you couldn't fail? Or you could look at it like Elizabeth and just say, you know what, fear is going to be there, but fear doesn't have to be the one calling the shots. So just to kind of get your juices flowing, and a question to reflect on is, what was one of the books that was the scariest for you to write? Maybe it was your debut because you didn't know what would happen. Maybe it was a book that dealt with a topic that was more sensitive than others. What was the book that took you the most courage? Or maybe there's a book idea inside you that you don't feel like you've got the courage for. I had a storyline like that myself, dealing with the school shooting. It's a huge fear of mine. I graduated high school in the class of 2000, and Columbine was in, I believe, either 98 or 99. Pretty sure it was the spring of 99. So it was like right smack dab in the middle of my high school years, and is, up until that time, kind of the most intense current event that I remember living through. And then, of course, now being a mom and things like that, it's like, it's this fear is in my mind. And so I actually wrote a book about it, a novel, but didn't finish it and didn't publish it, just to kind of get those things out there on the page. So that's a great question to start with, is where would you go if there was no fear? What would you write if you didn't end up having to publish it? Like, I actually started that book because the idea wouldn't let me go. I felt compelled to write it because, for me, I like to write about the things that I'm scared of. It helps me to feel a sense of control, right? Like, I can't control whether or not someone in the real world does something awful, but I can control what happens in the books that I write. And so that's kind of why I did it. And I even told myself as I was writing it, I wasn't going to publish it. It was too heavy of a subject, but I wanted to get it out there. So ask yourself, what is your story like that? The one that you would write if you weren't afraid it would make somebody mad or something. And then you have a couple options. You can go ahead and write it and then decide what to do with it, right? Maybe like me, you'll decide, hey, you don't even need to finish it, or you can finish it and not publish it. Maybe you'll decide to publish it anonymously. Maybe you'll just go ahead and get it out there, right? There are lots of things you can do with it after that point. But sometimes, in order to really give full expression and to truly honor our creativity, sometimes we need to go into those scary scenarios and dive into the projects that leave us feeling a little fearful. Imagine if a writer never stretched themselves at all, and the writing, the plots, the characters, everything would come across as pretty kind of cookie cutter. And so I feel like the more courage we have to take creative risks, the more potentially impactful our books are going to be. Another thing they talk about in Big Magic is the idea that creativity and the artistic expression should have a sense of playfulness to it. And we've talked about this before right here on the podcast, that yes, we need to take our work seriously. Yes, we need to be disciplined, but we also can bring a sense of lightness, of curiosity, of playfulness. I think as authors, we do such an amazing job with going down all the what if rabbit trails that there are to go down. What if my character went here instead of there? What if I wrote a book from this point of view instead of another? What if I blended these two genres? Whatever it is, we can have a sense of curiosity. That doesn't mean that we don't take ourselves seriously, but we can bring a sense of deep play into the books you write. So that's my next question for you is, what is a project you wrote that felt so fun to you? For me, it's my novel called Flower Swallow. I'm about to 40 or so books that I've published, and Flower Swallow is hands down my favorite. And the main character there, hands down, favorite character. There's no question in my mind. It's not a hard question for me to answer. And Flower Swallow is about this little boy who grows up on the streets of North Korea. He's got a hard life, but he's got such a spunky attitude. I had a reviewer call him a Korean Huckleberry Finn, is kind of the way that she summed up who he was. And writing that book was unlike any other literary experience I've had in all the dozens of novels before and since. It came fast. I think the whole thing was like maybe 11 or 12 days of drafting, another week to get it ready. Like I started it in the beginning of November and it was out well in time for people to buy and read for like Christmas presents. It happened fast. It came together fast. The story basically wrote itself. And even as I was writing it, I knew that I was blessed to be living through a very unique experience. I would never go so far as to say I'm never going to write a book like that again. I think that feels depressing and too limiting, but I recognized it was a very unique situation and didn't feel like work at all. Now I still had to show up and do the work, and I'm sure it took energy, but I don't remember that. I just remember the story coming so quickly and so easily. And even now, this is the only book of mine that I will go back and reread, maybe about once a year, because I adore the character so much. I feel like this little boy basically like showed up in my life and told me his story, and I just got to be along for the ride. So think about for you, like what is the most playful writing experience you've had? Or if you don't like that word, the most inspired, right? The one that wrote itself. And I don't want to perpetuate this myth that our books are going to be terrible if they don't happen like that. Sometimes it truly is a matter of showing up and doing the work. But that doesn't mean that when the muse does hit us and overtake us so strongly that we can't enjoy every single second. And lastly, there's a takeaway from Big Magic that I totally love, and that is the concept of a poop sandwich. It's not the language she uses, but it's one that I'm choosing to use for this recording. And the idea is that whatever job you choose, whatever choice you make in life, there's going to be hardships with it. So basically every job has a poop sandwich, and you just have to learn to love all the other aspects of that work enough that you don't mind the poop sandwich. She talks about a writer friend of hers who she would admit was a better writer, but he was not willing to go through the process, which, you know, back at that time meant finding agents and querying and getting rejections and things like that. That was too big of a poop sandwich for him. So he gave up. And she talked about how for her, like she was so compelled to become a writer that even the difficulties that come with the writing lifestyle were worth it. The way I like to look at it is this idea of choose your hard, right? The kind of trope going around, it's, well, being married is hard, being divorced is hard, so choose your hard. Exercising is hard, and being unhealthily overweight is hard, so choose your hard, right? No matter what we pick, there's going to be hardships to it. So we may as well embrace not only the good sides, but also the hardships. So for us as authors, that means embracing the 1-star reviews. It means riding the waves of low sales months. It means having to do some of the admin work that we wish we didn't have to do. It's just part of this incredible gift we have of being an author. And the idea is if you want it bad enough, those things aren't going to matter at all, right? So you have to upload your own book. Who cares? You get to be an author. You get to fulfill a dream that you have had for so long. And maybe that's not the case. Maybe you try it out and you're like, you know what? Going indie, not worth it for me. Okay, that's totally fine. There's no judgment there. It just means that it's not really for you. There was a story in Big Magic that I really liked. So this famous author is giving a public talk and a man asks him a question in the Q&A. And he's like, sir, you and I are about the same age. I've had a passion for writing just as long as you have. I feel like my life could have followed in your footsteps, but I just never got the breaks that I needed to become a writer, but I don't know what to do. I don't want to give up. Please don't just tell me to keep writing though, because it hurts too much to get all these rejections and to have this huge dream that's not coming true. And the author's response to him was, I know this isn't what you're going to want to hear, but I think you should give up. It's obviously not giving you joy to be an author. So I suggest that you totally forget that dream, find something else that makes you happy. And then you know what? If you can't find that, well, then there's nothing else to do but to come back and keep on writing. And that's what I would encourage you as well, wherever you are in the writing journey. Nobody says you've got to become a full-time writer. Nobody says you've got to write, 40 books. Nobody says you've got to publish it all. But if you can't picture a life where you're not doing that, well, then the things that do bug you, the 1-stars, the admin stuff, those things are just part of the process of being able to live out this dream of being a writer. So I hope that in your case, you are living the dream and loving every minute of it. And we'll talk to you later.